Hey everybody, it's Gabe from the Royal, and we're super excited that you've been joining us for our Advent series. This is the second Sunday in Advent, and we're just pumped that you're listening. The idea I had for this week was that the Old Testament is really easily summarized in the word transcendence. And what I mean by that is this, that the point of the Old Testament to prove to us and to show us and to reveal to us the existence of God in the universe, the superiority within that existence of God in the universe. In Exodus chapter 3, God reveals himself to Moses as his name being I am who I am. And that name, some translators translate it as Yahweh or Jehovah, but that name, the name of God, I am who I am, it's a name of transcendence. That name it's bewildering almost in its transcendence. It doesn't really solve any problems. It doesn't really solve the issues. It just states that God is who he is. He is the God who is, who was, who always will be. He's so far and high above us. It just really reveals that superiority to us. And really, it reveals that sovereignty to us. But the story wasn't over with transcendence. And many times when we get focused on the Old Testament, we can kind of get too focused on it and begin to overemphasize that transcendence and begin to think that God is this mean, distant, almost cruel, dictatorial, capricious God, leader that just the way he says it is the way it is, and he doesn't care about you and I. He's all about God. He's all about himself. And I do think that during Christian history, this period called the Reformation, there were some really good things that came out of the Reformation, but there were some things that came out of it that were also a little bit negative, and one of them was this overemphasis on the transcendence of God, and they called it the sovereignty of God. But what it did was kind of rewind the history of the church back into the Old Testament, when in the story of Advent, we don't see the transcendence of God. What we actually see in Advent is this new idea, not that God is so far and high and holy above us that he would never want anything to do with us. But what we see is the immanence of God. We see Jesus come down, God incarnate, come down and really stoop down to the ground, humbling himself and taking on the form of man and becoming not just a man, but a baby. And a baby that is vulnerable. God as a baby, the ruler and sovereign creator of the universe as a baby. I mean, that is so humbling and not superior and the opposite of transcendent. But that is why they called his name Emmanuel. Emmanuel means God with us. And that is really the heart of Advent, is that God is with us in the incarnation. He's come not to sit over us in judgment, but actually to open the doorway to us in mercy. And that mercy of God, who is Jesus Christ, comes and makes himself flesh in order to dwell among us, in order to be God with us. And it's such a fascinating thing, because if we were God, we certainly wouldn't condescend the way God condescends. We would condescend condescendingly if it was us. But we have to realize this, that God does not pride himself in his glory. God is not all about himself. God is not an egomaniac. God is a humble king. God is a loving and a merciful judge. He is a judge, no doubt. He is just, absolutely, but he's merciful. And he's so much more merciful than we sometimes assume. And that is the story of Advent. It's God being merciful to us, stooping down to earth and revealing himself as Emmanuel, God with us. And it's such an incredible idea that, again, he would become a baby, humbling himself in such vulnerability. The king and ruler of the universe, the creator of all things, becoming as a child. And I think that ought to inspire us to be childlike in wonderment and in amazement at the incarnation in Advent. Hope that blesses you.